title of your speech is Whipple. Stephen Walker with Whipple.
Get him to work with a mic.
In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight.
Whim away, whim away, whim away, whim away.
Tonight, it's not about the song or the Sandbelt tokens, but thank you. As I say, it's not about the song tonight. It's about me. Madam Toastmaster, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to speak about the song because it's a great number. But the lion I'm going to sleep about, the lion I'm going to sleep about, the lion I'm going to speak about tonight is the lion in the bed. We're talking about November. I remember November 2009 only because I'd heard about it after the event. I didn't participate at all. And that comes to the sleeping part of it. And tonight is the third and hopefully final speech in my series about surviving streptococcal septicemia. So just some weeks before November 2009 commenced, I was put to sleep. I was in a coma and I didn't wake up during November. And in fact, December had already passed by a few days before my eyes had opened. So things happen when you're in a coma. And what is a coma? It's defined as being when an individual cannot relate to their immediate environment. And that's what it was like for me. I couldn't relate. The lights were out. And I can assure you, nobody was home. But as you're coming out of the coma, some strange things happen. And it's got nothing to do with the full moon. But I would like to tell you a few stories about the hallucinations that I endured as I came out of the coma. Now, I didn't watch much television up until that time, so I didn't have any input into my mind of strange and vicious animals or strange deep-sea monsters and aliens from outer space. I had none of that. I only had general urban type experiences. So the first hallucination that I can recall was I couldn't understand why my son would keep moving me and he'd keep working around me, and every time I would signal for him to come over, he would ignore me. But I was so impressed though, his son, my grandson, was only 4 years old, but it was great to go to my son's shop and just observe my grandson looking after the deli. He had his own custom-made uniform. He was in charge of sorting the fish from the chicken. And I was so impressed because he was so diligent. Times move on, and I have another dream, shall we say, as I'm lying on the bed. And I told my daughter that one of the doctors had told me there was an article about the Alfred's ICU in the Age. And there was a paragraph about me. So she went off to get the newspaper. Now, it must have been the day before because there was nothing in the one she bought. She searched around at the office. No one had a copy of yesterday's age. She told me that she can't find any stories about the ICU. Another time, I said to my daughter, I've left a cheque in your car. Now this was no ordinary cheque, ladies and gentlemen. I and my daughter had gone to America, having been recommended to take on a position as a public relations consultant. And an elderly lady was just so impressed with my daughter and I. We stayed with her for a week in this remote cottage in Northern California, where the biggest thing that happened, and I was there for the biggest thing that ever happens to the town. That's right. They closed the railway crossing once a year for a train to come through. And the train is 4 or 5 kilometres long. And I was there, and the entire town was assembled at the railway crossing to watch this train go by, because it's the biggest thing that happens in the town in the period of a year. And it's full of great big, monstrous trunks from the trees that have been cut down. And the train just roars through town because it's a downhill run. It was great being in that town. But when my daughter searched, well, my daughter firstly couldn't search the car. Whilst I was having my sleep, one of my boys from Newcastle had driven down, had flown down, but driven the car back to Newcastle. So my daughter got my former wife to search the car for the cheque. The cheque was going to cover my expenses plus the expenses of running the PR for this great American who passed away some years before. And yes, I will tell you who the American is. But you wouldn't think my former wife would do things for me, but the cheque was missing. That was in the car. Now, bear in mind, my sanity levels were a little bit questionable. The fact is, of course, I hadn't been in my daughter's car for about 18 months. But nevertheless, she had her mum virtually disassemble the car to find this cheque. There was no cheque in the car. My daughter told me this, and well, that's strange. I'm sure I left it in the car. Anyway, it's only a cheque. We'll be able to get another one. But it was a big cheque. It was for $23 million. That's not the sort of thing you ring up and say, oh, look, the cheque. I've lost it. Can I have another one? So, this was a big disappointment to me. The disappointments continued. You know, I'm lying there in bed trying to wake up, but I couldn't. And let me tell you about comas, that you would think of all the doctors in ICU would know the average time spent in a coma. But they don't work like that. You're put into a coma and they bring you out of the coma just as soon as they can. So, comas are quite common. Very common for a day or two, 3 or 4 even. And a week's not unusual. A fortnight. It's getting more unusual. But over that, they're getting quite unusual. So I was in a coma for 6.5 weeks. So I had a lot of build-up in my mind of nothing, and then the mind wanted to tick over and start again. How's that time going, Mr. Timekeeper?
It's meant to be on red or
He's
not in a corner.
But when my brother was at my bedside and refused wanting to drive down the highway following the road trains. And I was telling him about it, and he's shaking his head. No, you've never been to the Northern Territory. My daughter said, no, I do all your flight bookings, you've not travelled to the Northern Territory. But I was there. I drove down the highway after the road trains. We had a great time. I was just watching them. None of that happened, ladies and gentlemen. None of that happened at all, except upstairs here. Coming out of a coma, hopefully you'll never get the opportunity to relate experiences with someone coming out of the coma. But if you do find someone in a coma, be prepared for some rather interesting stories. Now, when you've run out of things to think about, you can always sing when you're in hospital. And I enjoyed